Yes, thank you for everybody who's come and attended today. Also, if you did attend the previous session, I didn't make it, my sincerest apologies. Today, I want to kind of discuss the grey areas, which I feel like we've managed to fill that gap as an organisation, and kind of share our projects with you guys, my own lived experiences, and kind of connect those dots for you as well. Sorry, might have a few problems with the slide. So my name is Aliyah Ali. I'm a trauma-informed lived experience leader, consultant, researcher, and filmmaker, and also the founder of Daddyless Daughters. At Daddyless Daughters, we provide physical and emotional safe spaces for girls and young women between the age of 11 up to 25 who have been affected by family breakdown, abuse, and adversity. We run one-to-one and group mentoring programs, creative expression projects, community events, and educational workshops. And we also deliver trauma-informed training based on our lived experiences. The core of the work that we do in our organisation is based off of lived experiences, implementing trauma-informed practices, and we contribute to a lot of research projects with multi-agency partnerships that we have with organisations like Agenda Alliance and the Women's Centre of Justice. I just want to get to know a few of you guys in the room to start off with. I hope you guys have a sheet of paper in front of you. I'm going to ask that you draw 3 hearts on your sheet of paper. And in one heart, I want you to put, and I want you to think from a child's state of mind. So when you was a child, in your first heart, I would like you to put a place that made you feel safe. In the second heart, I would like you to draw or write an object that made you feel safe as a child. And in the last heart, I would like for you to put a person who made you feel safe. Unfortunately, I can't see everybody who is in the room, so I'm not able to pick people out. So I really hope that some of you volunteer, come forward and will be willing to kind of share those 3 hearts with us. I'll give you 2 minutes to quickly complete that. So just remember, it's from a child's state of mind, person, place, and object. I'll give you guys 1 more minute.
So what were the 3 hearts?
3 hearts. One of them is a person who made you feel safe. Second one is an object that made you feel safe. The last one is a place that made you feel safe. Okay, last minute is up. Could I have one volunteer who'd be willing to share?
Yep, I'll go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Place, I had my grandmother's house.
Right.
Object, a blanket.
Right.
I had a special blanket, and a person, my dad.
Right. Let's go to your grandma's house. What was it about your grandma's house that made you feel safe?
Just, you know, when you're there, it's the people that are there. There was always love in the home. You could always kind of get away with everything that you couldn't do really at your parents' house. Yeah, there was always activities to be done. Yeah, there wasn't like a lot of people coming in and out. It was just like a controlled environment.
Right. So is it fair to say that it gave you a strong sense of like belonging, identity, connection? Was something, those were like the 3 main things that you probably got from that environment when you was young?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And could you tell us a story about the blanket?
Yeah, so it was knitted by my grandma. So
Wow.
it was yeah, specially made for me. And literally I used to carry it everywhere. Like I wouldn't do anything without it. Like if I didn't have it, then I literally have a breakdown. So yeah.
Do you still have the blanket?
Yeah, but it's not with me in England. It's back home in Jamaica.
Okay, okay. And the last relationship was your dad, which I love.
Yeah.
And tell us about the nature of the relationship with your dad.
I think it's because he was really very encouraging. Like he literally told me I can do anything, I can kind of be anything, and was always supportive, always pushed me to do anything really in life. Like I feel like if no one else would take my corner, he would always take it. So
Yeah.
I think that's where that came.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. Do I pronounce your name Janelle?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us, Janelle. Is there anybody else who'd be willing to share? Just one more volunteer.
I'm willing. I'm here.
Yeah.
So I have, again, I've got my grandma's house, my grandma, and a teddy bear.
A teddy bear. And who's the person? Okay, so the person was your grandma. The place was her house, and the teddy bear. Could you tell us a story on the teddy bear?
So the teddy bear, I don't really. I think one of my mum's friends gave it to me. He was blue, and I took him everywhere that I went, and he always made me feel. He always made me feel safe.
Yeah, yeah. And the relationship with your grandma, what was about the nature of that relationship that made you feel kind of grounded as a child?
So my parents used to send me to my grandma's in all the holidays, and I used to go on my own quite a lot, and I'd spend a lot of time just one-to-one with my grandma, and she took good care of me, and she made sure that I did basic things that I didn't do at home, like eat regular meals and wash my hair and do all those kind of basic things. I felt very safe. There's a lot of routines there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I love to kick off my sessions with that activity, and it's not my activity. I'm not going to take any credit for it. And there's really no kind of like end message to it other than us kind of having a bit of a vulnerable moment with each other to start off with. When I first was asked to do that activity, I didn't have anything to put in my hearts. And I do it a lot with our Daddyless daughters now to kind of measure like where they're at when we first get in contact with them, and when we first start to build a relationship with them. Now, I kind of came from a background where we didn't have, there was a lot of generational trauma within our family. So my mum, I never met any sort of grandma, granddad, auntie, uncle, cousin, or anything like that. All I knew was the immediate family that was in the household. But before I kind of go on to that, a lot of the work that we do at Daddyless Daughters, the root causes of our work is based around general trauma and adverse childhood experiences. I'm obsessed with personal development. Personal development is something that saved my life. And I have a doctor that I listen to quite a lot. Her name is Dr. Nadina Burke. She's a trauma-informed doctor. And she has released a lot of research around how adverse childhood experiences impact you in your adult life. And, because I spent so much of my life living in survival mode, I didn't have the opportunity to unpack that until I was at a much later age. I have these 3 bears on our screen right now because she has a story where it's about like, imagine if you're in a forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your body is going to start to release stress hormones and adrenaline is going to kick in. Your heart is going to start to pound and you're either going to fight or flight in that moment. And that's wonderful if you're in a forest and a bear is approaching you. But what about those of us that live in environments where the bear is coming home every night? I lived in that environment. A lot of the girls that we support lived in that environment. Now, when that system is activated over and over and over again, it normalizes toxic stress and it also impacts our brain development, our immune system, our hormonal systems. And she also found out in her research that it can even impact the way your DNA is read and transcribed. I've got a brain scan here of a 6-year-old boy who was exposed to severe neglect and abuse in the first 2 years of his life. And the areas in red indicate to us where his brain is no longer functioning normally. I found all of this information that I dived into when I first listened to Dr. Nadina Burke on TED Talk. Very, very, very interesting, because it connected so many dots for me in terms of understanding how my behaviors were kind of working against me and not for me. But then it was so difficult to figure out how to overcome those, even when I wanted to receive love, support, and help. I had like, as a young child, as an adolescent, I had like a physical reaction to it where I would reject it and I would resist it strongly without understanding why. And it wasn't until I unpacked all this information that I was able to kind of dive into that and connect the dots. I want to tell you guys a bit more about how I grew up. The first slide was a block that I grew up living across the road from. I grew up in one of the biggest council estates in Europe, which is quite ironic because I ended up in one of the biggest women's prisons in Europe as well. And before the age of 13, I was exposed to a lot of adversity. I was living with my mum. She was a single parent. I had 2 other siblings in the household. Due to the childhood trauma that she had been exposed to, she was adopted. You know, she had a lot of abandonment issues. She didn't understand who she was as a woman. She didn't understand how to meet our needs because, you know, there was so much going on in her head due to how she had grown up. So she couldn't show up for us in certain ways that we needed as children. My dad, he was not present within our household. He was in and out of prison a lot when I was younger. So, you know, he was around for short periods of time. And when he was around, he wasn't necessarily the nice person to me. And then before I know it, you know, my mum got into a domestic violence relationship. And that was kind of the core of the chaos that happened within our house. A lot of the violence that we saw was due to that relationship. And, you know, at times my mum would also become quite abusive and violent herself towards us. Due to that relationship that she had, she also started self-medicating through alcohol and drugs. She would go on binges, so she would leave the house on maybe Monday and we wouldn't see her again until Thursday. That happened quite a lot throughout our childhood. I was also sexually abused from a young age, and I also was exposed to emotional abuse, physical abuse as well. It took me a long time to be able to sit down and digest everything that I had been through. Not only everything that I'd been through as a child, but how that impacted the way I placed myself in society, you know, how that impacted the relationships that I was drawn to, how that impacted the relationship that I had with myself, how that also impacted the relationship that I had with services. Services were organizations like social services, mental health services, behavior consultants. All of that was kind of introduced into my life around the age of 12, 13, when my behavior became severely complex. I became very angry at the world because I had been exposed to all these different things that, you know, I knew it wasn't right, but I also didn't know it was wrong, and it felt wrong, and it created all these internal conflicts that I didn't know how to articulate or express with any professional at that age. And so social service came into the picture, and before I know it, because of all these factors combined, I became a looked after child. That's kind of where my life took a U-turn. And, you know, all behaviors serve an emotional need. And I was unaware of my emotional needs at that age because of those holes that you have in your heart, right? And those voids that you have in your mind. Not only in your mind, in your heart, you know, you start going out into your community, which I did at that age, and looking to fill those voids in any way necessary. And before I know it, I was permanently excluded from school because of my rage, because of that aggression. And again, I didn't know how to articulate what I needed. My emotional needs, I was totally unaware of because I'd spent so much time living in a survival state of mind. Before I knew it, I started, you know, forming unhealthy relationships with older peers in my area, a lot of gang members within my area. started to draw close to us. All the children's homes that I lived in were kind of right in the middle of council estates. I was moved to probably about 3 or 4 placements around like Peckham, and Southwark was the local authority that I was looked after by. Before I knew it, I was being groomed and criminally exploited, which led to kind of me entering a world that I didn't have like a clue about, but I had to learn fast. But because I was that toxic stress, that survival mode was so normalized, I became addicted to that chaos, right? And I see a lot of our girls, I see a lot of that behavior playing out in our girls today, where it's like they're not even interested in entertaining the good guy, or, you know, it's so difficult for a professional who has great intentions for them to be able to engage with them and build an impactful relationship with them, because they're not interested. There's 2 parts of the conversation. There's one part where it's like, you know, there's barriers that prevent them from engaging with services. But then there's also the other part where how willing are they to accept the help? I was what you would call a young person who was hard to reach. And I believe the core of, you know, those young people who we say are hard to reach is their childhood trauma, and most importantly, their attachment styles. Like how do they form relationships, not only with people in their community, but how are they forming relationships with professionals and practitioners and their peers? We don't really dissect that information a lot. I was not interested in engaging in a lot of services at a young age, because I had built up all this resistance that I mentioned earlier. I also, you know, believed that I didn't really see anybody in those organizations that looked like me, that talked like me, that understood what it was like as a child living in care. Back then, the biggest representation we had of girls that lived in care was Tracy Beaker, and that had a huge negative effect on the way that society treated us as care kids. Our behavior was always put back on us in terms of, you know, you need to fix XYZ in order to gain access to this project, or, you know, in order for us to support you to go on to further education. Or it was always put back on me to kind of do the work that I need to do in order to address all these traumas that were way, way, way out of my understanding and out of my reach. So whilst I was being groomed and exploited, you know, many professionals, I believe, you know, wasn't really interested in what happened to me. More professionals were more interested in highlighting what was wrong with me, what was wrong with my behaviors, what was wrong with my the way that I was maneuvering and surviving in a system that, you know, I wasn't really equipped to thrive in. So before I knew it, I was 18 and I received a 4-year custodial sentence. I entered a grey area, which many of our girls enter, where it's, is she a victim? Is she a perpetrator? Is she vulnerable? Is she not? If I find a lot of professionals today, you know, unless a young woman is presenting with behaviours that they deem to be palatable in terms of vulnerability, then they're not willing to kind of go above and beyond for those of us that kind of show up with that chip on our shoulder, that maybe do have an attitude, that maybe do have a lot of barriers up and defenses. You know, they're more likely to be drawn to supporting girls who are maybe self-harming and maybe showing behaviours that are more obvious of her vulnerabilities. When I went into prison, that's where I saw this really play out. And, you know, the rate of young women self-harming in prison is severely high. I lived on a wing that was mainly for YOIs, so it was mainly for girls between the age of 18 up to 21. We were separated from the general population of the prison back then in Holloway until the riots happened. And literally, majority of the girls on my wing were self-harming. And it made me think, like, again, back to these misconceptions of vulnerability and what makes it palatable. I saw those girls were getting offered a lot of safe spaces and a lot of places to speak about the way that they were dealing with their emotional distresses. However, they wasn't necessarily opening up in those places. And I wanted to really kind of dig deeper into that, because I was reflecting on the different ways that me and my peers were self-harming. You know, we started self-medicating at a very young age, smoking weed, drinking excessive amounts of alcohol. A lot of my peers who had been sexually abused, hypersexualized themselves during adolescence. You know, they started taking harder drugs, but these behaviors was not necessarily, I would say, palatable for the professionals that we was working with back then. So we didn't necessarily get access or offered the relative projects and programs that could have deterred the paths that we were going down. So I kind of went into a big negotiation with a lot of the officers in Holloway, and I decided I wanted to become a listener. A listener is a role that you can get inside the prison. If you are a well-behaved prisoner, you get access to kind of go in when a young woman is self-harming, and de-escalate the situation. Back then, I was still quite angry, but I always had something about me which was quite influential on my peers. You know, I'd always used it in the wrong ways, but once I'd got to prison, and once I had kind of, I guess it also, and it's quite controversial to say, but that was the first time I felt a sense of safety, was when I went to prison. You know, it was kind of when I realized, like, I wasn't going to be raped here, I wasn't going to be physically abused here, emotionally and mentally manipulated. It was the first time that I didn't have to really think about my basic needs, my food, my clothes. You know, there was a routine implemented. It was kind of all the things I needed. However, what does that say about society? You know, so because I felt that sense of safety there, I was finally able to exhale and figure out, what do I want to do with that influence? Or what do I want to do about this? I was really passionate about that grey area of the fact that I was a child of the system. I've been put into a system that made me even more vulnerable than I already was, coming from a household with all of those adverse experiences. Going into care added a whole new layer of vulnerability onto my situation. And I'd entered this grey area where, you know, I don't know if it was because of how I looked, how I presented or what, but I just was not considered vulnerable. And it was always put back onto me to get myself away from those gang members. You know, even when I did go back to social services and I asked for some sort of support in terms of moving my accommodation, because I'd got heavily involved in a criminal lifestyle that I knew nothing about, you know, they just moved me to the other side of Peckham. And I was getting furious about these repeated failings of, you know, the system not being able to recognize my needs, but then expecting me to meet my own needs. And I wanted to do something about that fire that was building up in my stomach. So I negotiated with the officers and I said, look, I'm going to behave myself. I just want to become a listener. I just want to support other girls in our wing that are self-harming. And I want to figure out why, like, what's the root cause of all of this stuff? They had no faith in me, but, you know, luckily I managed to, within 3 weeks, get that listener's badge and provide those spaces for the girls. What I had found out, the stories that the girls were telling me were like, I thought I came from a traumatic background, but, you know, like my mum never groomed me into prostitution. A lot of the girls that I met, it was their parents that had groomed them. You know, it was their fathers that had sexually abused them. And I felt like the main thing that we all had in common was we all came from broken families. Not only did we come from broken families, we had this deep-rooted generational trauma that was just weaving through our stories. All had similar themes that were connected to it. And I guess that was when the beginning of Daddyless Daughters was birthed within my soul, within my heart. And I was really getting obsessed with how come nobody else is talking about this? Then I come out and then I start, you know, jumping on my personal development bandwagon and, you know, started exposing myself to all this neuroscience information and all these psychologists and how everything was interconnected. But then that also gave me a strong sense of empowerment that I could change my own life. Once I kind of left prison, I went back to my local authority and I you know, wanted to connect all these dots for them. And that's when the beginning of Daddyless Daughters was birthed. I'm not sure if everybody is aware, but right now in the UK, along with Ireland, we have the worst statistics of family breakdown in the entire EU. We have 3.8 million children fatherless in the UK, with 200 children losing contact with their fathers every day in secret courts. And the cost of family breakdown every single year is 44 billion. I believe that, like, childhood trauma and also fatherlessness is the most harmful demographic trend of this generation. It's the leading cause of not only declining child well-being in our society, it is also the engine driving our most urgent social problems, from crime to adolescent pregnancy to child sexual abuse to domestic violence against women and girls. Today, a child sitting their GCSEs is more likely to own a smartphone than be living at home with their father. The most recent project that we did, and the most recent kind of topic that we're exploring and trying to really double down on as an organisation, is particularly young women, girls and young women who are engaging with the criminal justice system. We contributed to a piece of research that was published by a gender alliance. It's called the Young Women's Justice Project, and we're doing quite a lot of work around that this year as well, which helped us to identify, all those things I just discussed with you was my story 10 years ago. How is these things and these issues playing out today, particularly within the criminal justice system? And we found that between 3/4 and 90% of girls in contact with the criminal justice system today may have experienced abuse from a family member or someone that they have trusted. 63% aged between 16 and 24 serving community sentences have experienced rape or domestic abuse in an intimate partner relationship. 74% of girls in youth custody have previously been permanently excluded from school, compared to 63% of boys. And children aged 16 to 17 living in children's homes are 15 times more likely to be criminalized than any other child of the same age. I would just want to kind of take a moment for us to listen to Tia's story. We did a project last year called Layers, looking inside Holloway Prison. Now, remember I said the heart of our work is research, lived experience, and research, lived experience, and trauma-informed in practice. So I want to kind of touch on Layers, how we brought that together, how we developed that project, and how we weaved our values into every single part of this project, which I'm very, very, very passionate and proud of. So I was given an opportunity to take up to 30 women back to Holloway Prison before its full closure and before it was fully being demolished, and tell their stories. As a part of this project, we put a call out for women as a part of our community on our social medias and stuff like that. We also designed the whole creative expression part of this project with a group of young women who engage with Daddyless Daughters services, who are at risk of engaging with the criminal justice system. And so they joined the production team, getting mentoring in videography, photography, lighting, sound engineering. We had one of our superstar girls go on to do some work experience with Vogue after she did our project. And so we weaved the lived experience and the trauma-informed practice. How we added that layer on was we had a team of very, very, very phenomenal therapists. We have one in the room who is Maria, love her to bits, who could provide a safe space for our women, both young women and the women who were engaging in the project, on site if they were triggered. So we're just going to take a moment to listen to Tia's story now. What labels have been put on you throughout your...
Bully, drug dealer, manipulator, the violent one. A letter to my dad. To Dad, I wanted to tell you how you brought me up, affected me growing up and becoming an adult, dealing with everyday life. You made it hard for me to be a happy child. You beat me like a man with so much hatred. I was left with scars mentally and physically. My story is a story that a lot of females go through, that growing up you'll think it's normal, but it's not normal. Not everyone that comes to prison is someone that's bad or that's disrupting the world or just out just to disrupt life in general. There's reasons and stories behind why certain females come to prison. I double think, even triple think everything I do, and wonder if I'm gonna ever mean anything to anyone in this lifetime. And that's all because of you. I've got good memories and I've got bad memories. My bad memories being obviously from home and then coming here and realizing. And I got good memories because I met some real people in here, making me believe in myself, making me believe I'm not the bad person that I act out to be, and that there's more to me deep down because they took the time to get to know me for me. The thing is, I grew up to be just like you. But I'm trying to change that because I don't want to be miserable and always angry at everyone and the world because of my past. I'm going to grow to love myself and to be the woman I want to be, not the girl you wanted me to be. Before sentencing someone or putting a label on them and harassing them and making their life even more stressful than what they're already going through, maybe sit and understand and try and work out and help them instead of putting them somewhere where there's nowhere to turn or really anyone to talk to.
Now, I think what I feel like the core theme of Tia's story that stands out to me and that I feel like we can all learn from is the part where she says, you know, growing up, you think it's normal, but it's not normal. That is kind of the core of a lot of the girls that we support. Like, their internal conflicts are much bigger than us, much bigger than the services that they engage with. Like I said, the household that I came from left holes in my heart that led me to going into my community to fill in those voids the only way I knew how, to survive. Fill in those voids, and not the best ways, in the most harmful and destructive ways. I didn't even trauma onto, you know, the trauma that was inflicted on me in my home. And so going on to try and like engage with services that don't necessarily understand the core of the impact that trauma and those experiences had on me added a whole nother kind of, a whole nother layer, I would say, a whole nother layer of trauma that like I still have to unpack to this day, to be honest with you guys, being a child of the system. So when I asked our girls, like, what do they feel like are the main barriers or the best ways kind of with them engaging with services and projects that are out here today, they gave me 3 main points. We have a youth advisory board with a group of young women who have kind of got major positive outcomes from our Sister Squad mentoring service. And these were the 3 points that they gave me to speak with you guys about today. That layer of, I guess, systematic trauma that I mentioned is still present within a lot of the girls that we support. And they felt like the first thing that kind of needs to be addressed by organizations is rebuilding that trust, particularly with vulnerable girls and young women. Co-designing projects and programs that are designed by them, for them, that help them to feel a sense of value, that help them to feel a sense of empowerment. And I feel like this is so important because the first time I felt valued, empowered, was when I made myself useful to gangs who were grooming me. I didn't get that sense of empowerment and value in educational settings. I didn't get it offered to me in the children's homes that I lived in. I had to go and build that, a false sense of that as well. I had to go build that somewhere else. And a lot of our girls are engaging in harmful relationships and ending up being criminally and sexually exploited because those emotional needs are being met by these perpetrators, that those emotional needs are not being met by services or by people that are representing those services. When we're training our outreach workers, you know, that trauma-informed practice of understanding a girl might not be engaging because all she knows is rejection, all she knows is abandonment. So she's going to project that onto you to make you feel worthless, but that is just how she feels about herself. Constantly reminding our outreach workers of the core driving trauma that our girls are kind of, that internal conflict that they're always at war with at home by themselves, and constantly reminding them the different ways that that's going to play out in their behavior, and affirming our outreach workers within those moments that no, we have to keep trying, we have to keep reaching out to the girls, and we have to keep providing that space no matter how much times they don't show up, or you know, they cancel the appointment. Always show up, always provide that space for them. So I feel like that's the heart of rebuilding the trust, and you know, that added layer of understanding what emotional needs you can meet as a service if you do implement these type of spaces, how positively beneficial that will be to our girls. Recognizing the realities of young women's lives, you know, be willing to name the barriers that young women are facing. Going back to the Free Bears story, a lot of girls like myself, we didn't feel safe in our homes. We didn't feel safe in our communities. We didn't feel safe in these systems. The first time I ever felt safe was in prison. What does that say about society? Naming all of the different barriers and challenges that young women in particular are facing, and understanding and recognizing different cultures, different identities, different backgrounds are also going to impact that. So looking into how those different added layers will impact each girl individually. Lastly, celebrating the strengths and amplifying their voices. Representation is key. As I said, the first kind of representation we had was Tracy Beaker, and that had a major negative impact. And that's why through my filmmaking career, I really am passionate about putting these stories and these girls on the forefront, and weaving their experience into the whole part of the production, which we created a very therapeutic framework that I feel like we could roll out everywhere. You know, there's one thing about saying we value lived experiences, but if we value lived experiences as organizations, we also have to be aware of the impact of asking young women and girls to continuously share their experiences and their stories. You know, that does have an impact on them. And at some point, we do have to get to the point of rewriting our narratives. So encouraging and designing projects and services to be shaped around that will also have a major positive impact. Thank you guys for listening to me today. I tried to cram as much as I can into an hour. Normally I'm used to getting a lot more time, but I hope you guys were able to take something very beneficial from the stories that I've shared with you, from the information that I've shared with you. And I'm happy to take any questions, or for us to have a conversation around any of the stuff that I've raised today.
Thank you so much, Aliyah, for sharing your personal insights and your personal stories. And, you know, I appreciate how much of you it takes to share those experiences. And, you know, we're really grateful for that in terms of helping us think about, you know, what we need to do differently. Are there any questions from the floor? Did anyone have any things they wanted to ask Aliyah?
Yeah, I've got a question. Could you spell the doctor's name that you said? Nadine. Yeah. What was the surname?
Burke. B-U-R-K-E.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Mm-hmm. And yeah, thanks for sharing your story. It was really, there were some things that I hadn't considered, especially looking at it, as you say, from that grey area perspective, mm-hmm. kind of stop turning things back on them. So so I work within Westminster, and I work in the sport, leisure and active communities team, and we do have programs that kind of work specifically with looked after children not in further education, children like that, you know, get referred to the PRUs and stuff like that. So in terms of like how to engage those kinds of people, what would you say would be like the best steps? I know you mentioned like co-producing certain of the programs, but in terms of like existing programs, kind of how best would you say to kind of get those people engaged in it?
I feel like, you know, the core of engagement is relationship. Is what's the nature of the relationships that we have with these young people? You know, how long have you already kind of been in their lives? How aware are we of kind of all the different moving parts that are happening in the background of their lives? Because that also kind of will impact if they're able to engage, and to what capacity can they engage as well. Because, you know, we get girls that will show up to all of our sessions. There's 100% engagement rate, but are they mentally present? Are they emotionally present? You know, they come with a lot of baggage at the same time. So even though they're present, some of our girls, like half of our group would be present within the body, but there is a lot going on underneath. And so what are they really taking away from that space? So yeah, I would say the core of engagement is based on the relationships that you have with your young people, meeting them where they're at. That, I guess, is the first step that I will always encourage our outreach workers to be aware of. Always meet young people where they're at. Lead with curiosity. Ask them 101 questions about their life. And always keep in your mind, it's not what's wrong with them, it's what happened to them. Yeah. So lead with that level of like curiosity. And I'm telling you, once you dive into their world with them, you will be inspired to come up with projects and programs that cater to those needs. And then once you've designed that program, you take it back to them and then you co-produce it with them. The final blueprint of that program does not get finalized until you kind of, had them all in one room and said, look, guys, I've had this idea. What do you guys think of it? And just giving that sense of empowerment and ownership over the program will encourage them to want to engage as well, and also would encourage them to want to bring other people and other young people to engage.
Amazing. That sounds good. Thanks. And in terms of like the groups that you run, do you actually run anything within Westminster?
So we're based in Lambeth. We do through our sister squad services. Our sister squad services are pan-London. So we work with girls from all different boroughs. We run, so I'll tell you a bit about our sister squad outreach service. We get girls between the age of 11 up to 25 referred to us who have been affected by family breakdown, abuse and adversity. We have got a particular requirement, but they don't have to meet kind of all of those requirements, even if they live in a household where domestic violence is present, and they haven't been exposed to other adversities, they're still eligible to join. They get given a trauma-informed outreach worker who then provides them the one-to-one space. And then we have our girl group spaces that we run, which is about creative expression. And it's also about them figuring out healthy coping mechanisms. So, for example, last month, a lot of our girls were angry. They were getting sent home from school. There was just a lot of rage. That was the main theme for a lot of our girls' stories that month. So we hired a rage room down in Maidstone. We took all of them down there and we said, right, this is free range, smash everything up. Stop smashing up your placements because you're going to have to clean up your bedrooms after anyway. Like, just stop doing those things. This is a safe space for you to be angry in. Go in that room. We gave everybody plates and we said, address everything. Write down the person that you're angry about. Write down the incidents that you're angry about. Write everything down. And then they all went into their own individual rooms and just smashed the hell out of that room. And then when they came out, we had a conversation about it. So our girl group spaces are more about us figuring out healthy ways of releasing that emotion and healthy coping mechanisms, because a lot of them have adopted bad coping mechanisms through living that survival state. Not only that, you know, we've got parents that have had to self-medicate and do everything due to their trauma. So also understanding their relationships with those behavior patterns and stuff like that. So yeah, we have that girl group space that's provided for all of them to come together and have those conversations. And then the last layer is the creative expression projects. We're in the process of working on our first documentary, and so the girls are all a part of that production, that whole narrative, the first Daddyless Daughters documentary, and they're shaping that with us. But yeah, we work with girls from all over London, and we're also moving into Reading at the end of this month as well to start doing some work up there, and some girl group work up in Buckinghamshire as well. So we're open to working with any local authority who wants to kind of have these conversations, and we believe like multi-agency work is really important within our sector, right? Because the needs are so complex, we don't expect the council to meet all of the needs, and we can't expect Daddyless Daughters to meet all needs either. So it's important that we work together, especially when when dealing with this cohort of young women, I guess.
That sounds amazing. I think I'll probably drop you an email because we have a few projects coming up within our sport, leisure and active communities team. That would be good because we are working on currently a space was Make Space for Girls project in terms of co-designing an outdoor space within Westminster. And of course, as I mentioned, we already have those kind of programs and kind of getting more girls into, because of course there's physical activity sport. We know the impact that it can have, that positive impact. So kind of getting that more girls, because even the programs that look at people looked after children is, again, everything's mainly males and male dominated, so kind of getting more females into it. So yeah, that would be good. I'll definitely drop you an email. Thank you.
Yes, I'll look out and hear for you. I'll look out for your email, and definitely would love to meet with you separately to kind of connect some dots.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the floor? I've got Suki.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It was such a interesting and such a thought-provoking presentation and discussion. My role is that I work in the NHS, and I have done for many years, based in Northwest London. And a lot of my role has been around research, and so a lot of the time I think about how I can involve more of our local population into the research that we do. But it was really interesting to hear your points about the challenges around the interactions with the systems. Actually, we talk a lot in research about the issues that we have, that patients have a real mistrust of the hospital system, and that some of the things that happened during COVID only exacerbated those perceptions that us as an institution cannot be trusted. We didn't perhaps test out the vaccine in all the populations we could have done, and all the kind of things that had happened, and now people can't get an appointment. There's strikes, there's always these kind of difficulties around the healthcare system, and that doesn't help us kind of really paint that picture about how positive research can be, because people's perceptions about their healthcare system isn't great. And just interested to hear your thoughts about that. And then also what also struck me in the conversation was one of our hospitals is Hammersmith Hospital, which is right next to Wormwood Scrubs prison. So many mornings I would walk past, and just thinking about what more can we do as an NHS organisation with a prison literally as our neighbour. So yeah, just interested to hear your thoughts about that.
What immediately came to mind when you mentioned kind of how close you are within reach to the prison would be like the mental health in prison is rife. Like, figuring out as an organisation, how could you advocate for that? How could you raise more awareness around that? Working with, people that have lived experience being in prison with mental health problems and stuff like that. And not only that as well, like another thing that came out of our Layers project was healthcare around with women in particular in prisons. And, you know, when you're in prison, you did not get access to the level of healthcare that you need as a woman. And yeah, maybe diving into that with some research and stuff, and you know, pregnancy in prisons, you know, there's mother and baby units. There is a lot going on within those spaces, especially within healthcare. And kind of, I don't look, but one thing I do say to a lot of professionals, especially throughout like my longer form of training sessions, yeah, I firmly believe we're in the business of planting seeds. We can't change everybody's lives. We work and represent systems that are way older and bigger than us, right? And I don't believe any of us come into our line of work thinking that we're going to become millionaires. We really want to have an impact on our community and help people. That's the core of why we do what we do. So I always like to encourage professionals, go back to that humanize that, like go back to your even your own professional experiences of working with a system. Remember what drove you into the role that you're doing now. Because I will guarantee it was either you went through something traumatic or you saw somebody go through something traumatic and you wanted to make a change. And so I believe advocating is such a valuable thing for us to do as organizations that not a lot of organizations do. We're so fixated on fixing the problems and solving the problems, which are way bigger than us, right? Than instead of like, and this is why I love research, because it's all about investigating the problem more than you know, I guess getting fixated on what the solution is. So I would say I would love to see the NHS get into some advocacy and raise an awareness on the different communities that you guys serve, the different issues that are within those communities that you guys serve. And again, as I said, designing those things with the communities that you guys serve, getting those messages out there to a wider audience, to a national audience, has also, for my organization, has really kind of repositioned us. And also, the other side of the conversation when it comes to advocacy is when we put out films and when we put out podcasts and our narrative as an organization, it's like a bird call. And girls that grew up how we grew, they come flocking in numbers. Okay, so it kind of works hand in hand when, you know, you come up with such a creative, valuable resource that the community can, I guess, champion. So that will be kind of the first thing that kind of came to mind that I wanted to share with you. Another thing that I was thinking as you were speaking was learnt lessons and how much of a triggering statement that is. Language, how triggering language can be to young people when they're entering a service, when they're trying to engage with professionals. That is a major barrier right now, particularly with our young girls have expressed that, like, it's like they just need these systems, or the people that represent these systems, to just start humanizing it. It's okay to learn lessons as an organization. It's okay to make mistakes, you know, but how transparent are we with the service users about that? And secondly, how honest are we about what we can change and what we can't change, being very, very clear about those boundaries. And thirdly, I would say, again, having that honest line of communication, the relationship, honoring and valuing that relationship that you have with your service users, it is really important. I know we're all going to make mistakes as organizations. These things are way bigger than us, as I said before. So we can't prevent that from happening. But again, it's the processes and it's valuing the relationships that we have with our service users that I feel like changes the game. I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.